Okay. Good evening, people. How are you doing?
Good.
All right. So let's see cognitive and social, emotional, and moral development today. So one guy by the name Lefrancois uh, came up with, gave a statement that a child, their head is not where it is. Okay, a head of a child is not where yours is. That means their head is somewhere in the clouds. Matlab, they imagine a lot, they see a lot, and that is why magic is more clear to them, or more understandable to them, or more acceptable to them than to an adult. The objectives of for today's classes will be discussing the four dimensions of development of individuals in a middle childhood. That is when they're in the middle school age, somewhere between fourth standard and seventh standard, or fourth grade to seventh grade. We will be looking at their cognitive, social, emotional, and moral development. We'll also be looking at Piaget's concept of cognitive development and defining social development during this middle childhood, explaining the emotional maturity during these school going ages, and also explaining the moral development, which was given by Kohlberg. That is Kohlberg's theory. Now, cognitive development, what is it? Cognitive development is the growth and maturity of thinking processes of all kinds that include the perceiving, remembering, concept formation, problem solving, imagining, reasoning. And these various cognitive development theories exist which attempt to explain the mechanism that underlie such growth and maturation. That means all these different types of the cognitive processes combined together help us understand how we grow as a person and how we mature, not just by body but also by mind. Explanation of these may be in terms of the stages of development in which the changes in thinking are relatively abrupt and discontinuous, or the changes may be viewed as occurring gradually and continuously. Now, there are two types of people who say that this development is a very smooth slope towards maturation, and they say that there is no abrupt or sudden uh, changes. They think of it as a slope or a ramp towards maturation. But there are other people who say that it is a very abrupt process, or it is a very discontinuous process, more like steps. It goes in order of steps and not like a slope which is smooth. But to be honest, when we look at the development of a child or of an individual, we see a lot of disturbances and very confused states and very abrupt burst outs and all that, which kind of proves that, not exactly proof, but kinds of tells us that change, that is the stages of development, may be more abrupt and discontinuous than continuous. Now, between the ages of 5 and 7, a child's a child thought process changes. The way they think changes. Because before that, it is more egocentric, right? Whatever they think is the final thing. In terms of Piaget's theory, this stage is also known as the pre-operational stage, the stage where the egocentrism comes in. And during the stage, a child transitions from the stage of induction of logic to understanding concrete ideologies. Now, logic in the sense, when we say, when they look at a four-legged animal, we talk about a dog, and this actually they apply it to everything. That is, if they see a cat, if they see a pig, whatever it is a dog. But when it comes to concrete ideologies, it is more like, okay, a dog is an animal that barks. They're cute and very sweet, and a cat is more what do you call it, aggressive in nature or very subtle in nature. A pig is mostly stinky. These are all the concrete logics that they ideologies that they take up. And after this stage, or at this stage, they are considered capable of being without their mom or their caretaker, meaning they can spend a little time away from their parents and still not start crying. They're not as dependent on their caregivers as they were previously. Okay, a network of nerves permit information amongst the brain. This network has developed from their previous stage. So, what is our brain? It is a connection of networks. Now, when this develops, our cognitive processes also develop. Now, Piaget's theory of cognitive development, we are talking only about the concrete operational stage. This is known as a third stage of Jean Piaget's cognitive theory. And here is when they start thinking more logically, and they can experience these events in a concrete manner, as in they're understanding certain aspects in a very tangible way. Operations here, or mental operations here, are more flexible, and they're combined with other cognitive types, such as solving problems and all that. Such as, for examples for these are mathematical operations and relations among categories. That means these people can actually form relationship between categories. That is, suppose say fruits. So when you're talking about fruits as a huge category, you'll also come across mangoes, apples and all that. They can form a relationship between these kind of categories. Decentration is one of the processes that they undergo through. Decentration is a gradual progression of a child away from egocentrism towards the reality shared with others. That means, see, as a child, they're very egocentric, meaning whatever I say is the final thing. Whatever I think is the way everybody thinks. There is no other way of thought. This occurrence that happens during the concrete operational stage, this is an occurrence that happens during the concrete operational stage, and decentration includes understanding how another person thinks about the world. Sorry about that, a call came in. Knowing about the world around us, looking at it in different perspectives, recognizing what people think or what they feel, and putting yourself in another person's shoe. Now, this is one of the conversion tables that Piaget gave to us. See the number here. If you look at the first thing, they're talking about the different points of view. Now, if you look at the first line, which says numbers, there are six balls in the first row and six balls in the second row. But if you give it to a child in a different format, suppose say you space out the number of balls in the first row and put all the balls very close together in the second row, the child generally at the beginning stages of this concrete operational stage would say that the first line is bigger than the second line. But towards the end of this concrete operational stage, when they're moving on to their formal operational stage, they know that it is a number that counts and not the distance that they're placed at. Now, if you look at the length of the lines that are given here, the first two are equal. In the first way, both the lines are equal. But once they're placed in different angles, no, the child at the beginning of the concrete operational stage will say that the second line is longer than the first line. But towards the end, they understand that both the lines are in equal length. Same goes to the volume of liquids, the mass of an object, an area occupied, weight, and volume. Okay. Now, a new egocentrism is formed. What is a new egocentrism? When during their childhood time, as I said, they think only in their perspective. Whatever they think is right, whatever they feel is right, it is the only way according to them. But as we grow older, as we grow to this age of 6 or 7, during this stage, we start to realize that ours is not the only way of thinking. Here, a toddler doesn't understand that other people have different points of view. However, this idea is replaced by a different egocentrism, which is a little more flexible, a little more logical, and a lot more objective in nature. During this middle school age, a child accepts or begins to accept that his way of thinking is not necessarily the only way of thinking. Logical reasoning. Now, logical reasoning, by the stage a child generally develops the ability to think logically. That is inductive reasoning. What is inductive reasoning? Inductive reasoning is the form of reasoning in which the inference and general principle are drawn from a specific observation and case. Inductive reasoning is a cornerstone of scientific method, in which means that the underlying process of developing hypothesis from a particular fact or observation. All right, so inductive thinking is the way we reason, right? Reasoning that goes from specific to general. It is usually when we see patterns, no, that is where inductive reasoning works out. If you see the number of triangles that are here in this particular diagram, a normal person would not know how to count it, but since we all have inductive reasoning, we can actually tell the number of triangles with a little help of counting. And we know that the number of triangles in this particular diagram are 13. Okay, the children at this stage start to understand if and then conditions, and but this is by the time they reach the fifth grade. Concept formation. Now, till fifth grade, concept formation is not taught because we will not understand it till that stage, right? If you see, we were not allowed, at least in our school, we were not allowed to wear watches till the fifth standard because we wouldn't understand how to tell time. That was where we could correspond to the numbers that was put to us. You know, adding, subtracting gets a lot more easier at this stage. Telling time is taught to us. We understand it. We understand distance. That is where science is actually introduced to us. So the concept formations have certain subcategories to them. Numbers, that is one-to-one correspondence. This is complete during the age between 6 and 7. Now, time before the age of 8, as I said, placing events in an appropriate time or an appropriate order becomes difficult. So if you look at children below the age of 6 or something, no, they do not understand what yesterday was, what today is, what tomorrow is. They generally confuse themselves while giving out these words just because they heard their elders talk about it. Okay, they do not understand the passing of time and all that till at that point. Okay, and after the age of 8, a children has a more better understanding of minutes, years, hours, etc. And then they can actually tell you that yesterday I went to the park, today I ate this, tomorrow my dad is taking me to the zoo. Things like that, they can actually tell it in a right way. Now, spatial understanding. A child generally has a difficulty understanding space or distance, such as miles, feet, kilometer. If you see, a child generally, when you're around children, no, they below the age of 8 again, do not understand personal space and all that. They will come and stick to you, or you can't hear them because they're standing too far away. But after the age of 8, the social norms come in. Teachers teach you what personal space is, and at least a basic understanding of how far you have to stand from someone. Now, before the age of 8, if you say that no, you have to socially distance yourself to a kid, that is, if you say you have to socially distance yourself in the current situation, they wouldn't understand as to what it is. But after the age of 8, no, when you're talking about social distancing, they know 6 feet is this much. Before that, they'll usually be confused. Classification, again, when you're talking about classifications, so see, like vegetables, fruits, and other items like leafy vegetables, they understand the concept of these classifications. Now, when we were in fifth and all that, when biology classes started happening, we went through this classification of the animal and the plant kingdom. So it came, the first thing that was there was kingdom of animals and kingdom of plants. Now that is a major classification. Under that, there are several other classifications such as amphibians, aviators, mammals, and all that. And those were also different types of classifications. So that went from general to specific. Okay. Now they were taught about class inclusions or class additions. Seriation. Seriation is a process of arranging or collecting items in a specific order. Now, if you look at the diagram here, uh, there is, it says arrange these objects from the shortest to longest. Can someone help me with arranging these items in shortest to longest form?
Crayon, pen, and scissor.
Correct.
Scissors,
Okay,
yeah.
there's another way you can arrange this actually. Okay, a pen, a crayon, and a scissors. This, does anybody understand why I said pen as the shortest first?
Putting top and
Sorry?
Removing the cap or
Isn't
something.
No,
isn't
no,
the
no.
by
The
closing the
length of the word, the length of the word.
Oh.
That is just for us. That's a basic example. That's what my dad came up with yesterday when he was looking through this PPT. That was just for fun, anyways. So when you're talking about seriation, you're placing items in a certain order. Okay. And according to the Piagetians, that is Seema's relatives, this ability is necessary to understand the concept of numbers, time, measurement, and is acquired by the child during this concrete operational stage. That means without the concept of seriation, without being able to place certain things in certain orders, you won't be able to understand numbers, you won't be able to understand time, because there's all groups, classifications, and other things that need the seriation. You won't be able to place stuff in ascending or descending orders if you do not have the concept of seriation. Now, information processing approach to cognitive development. What is this? It was suggested that the concrete logic in the middle childhood is a result of improved cognitive processes such as attention, perception, memory storage, and problem solving. Now, what is attention? Attention is the act of dealing with something or someone by taking special care, right? You're focusing yourself completely on that topic. Now, look at the girl, she's trying to do something, and all her attention is focused on that. Perception. What is perception? Perception is a neuropsychological process which includes memory, by which organisms become aware and interpret the external stimuli. Now, if you look at the second picture on the rightmost right top corner, what do you look at it? If you look at it from this angle, it'll look like a skeleton or a skull. But if I zoom in, you can see a beautiful scenery that is there, right? Amazing painting, by the way. Now, what is memory storage? Memory storage is a retention of memories. As we talked about when we were doing the Vog and Norman's theory and all that, if you look at the brain, no, you can think of it as a storage unit where you've kept all your memories in boxes and files and stacked it away. Now, that is your memory storage. Problem solving skills, the ability to solve problems. Now, again, language development is one of the important things that goes on during this period. Children between the ages of 6 and 12 continuously develop their reading and also improve their understanding of words and their meanings. That means these children tend to understand the meanings of the words. That is, not only understanding the word is written in such a way, but also understanding what it means. That means they're relating it to their own mother tongue in the case of India, because there are many other languages that are taught here during the childhood itself, during your pre-operational phase itself. Now they're going to think of it like that. If I say pig, for me, my mother tongue is Telugu, so I'll think of it as pandi. All right. So it is like that. So they'll understand the meaning and all. The children are trained to observe the relationship between the words and their structure. So suppose I'm teaching a child and they're already they've gone through the pre-operational stage and now they're in the beginning of the concrete stage. Their way of thinking improves. So what they know is, if I say pig, pig, then the letter I is spelled as E, pig, right? So whenever they see I in the next few words, suppose say HIT, they'll think of it as hit, not height, right? So things like that, your structures, your relationship between the words are seen. Okay, and children between the age of 6 and 7 generally are confused by irrelevant information, complex structures, and hidden meanings of certain words. So when we throw around big words to children around this age, they're generally confused with irrelevant stuff. That means they're looking at the word, they're not able to understand the structure or the construction of that particular word. So they're generally confused. Aggressive behavior can be seen in kids with language disabilities. Kids who cannot express themselves through words generally tend to be very aggressive. That means whatever information they cannot give verbally, they're just doing it physically by hitting, throwing, shouting, jumping, throwing temper tantrums and all that. They're doing it because they have a language difficulty. And effectiveness in communication also is increased along with cognitive, sorry, I think that word has gone through, just a second.
Language development or something.
Yeah, overall development, sorry, I missed the word. Okay, now because we've read through the entire Piaget's thing and all that, I'll show you a small video on the Piaget's conversion tasks. Okay.
Is it conversion or conversation?
Conversion.
Okay.
Conversion.
I'm so sorry, I directly linked it to YouTube.
Vasudha, is there any volume in it?
Yeah, I'll.
You had shared this, no? It was really nice. Yeah.
Can you hear it?
Mhm.
No, while you're sharing, you have an option called share volume also. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Before you click on a tab or a window that you want to share, on the left side down, you will get share volume or share sound. You might have to click that.
I shall try. I'm not sure if I can do this.
Don't worry too much. You can just tell us what's happening, and probably it's a very simple one.
Okay. That should do. Okay. So now now what happens is she places the coins in a certain order, right? So the first row and the second row are equally placed and all that. Now she starts to move the second row. So the second row is more spaced out, and the child thinks that the second row has more coins than the first row. But when she's asked him to count the number of coins in the first and second row, he realizes that it is the same number of coins. So the number of coins is the same. That is, no matter how distantly placed they are, it is the same. I will definitely share this video on your YouTube. Sorry, not YouTube, WhatsApp. Okay. And the same thing, the lines that are there, the sticks that are there are equal. When she moves the stick, she says the first stick that is there is longer. But when she's asked him to reason this out, he finds out that the sticks are equal in length. Now she's pouring out a cup of a water in a cup. And later on, she asks him to tell her to stop when the amount of water is equal. After which she picks up one of the cups. He's measuring it out now. She picks up a taller glass, which is narrower in nature, and pours out the liquid into that glass. Now she asks him which is more. He says the taller glass has more water just because the amount of water looks different. But then after explaining or after asking him to explain, he again understands the concept. All right. It's the same for this, the volume, the mass, everything that the conversion table that we've seen before. They're going to do all the experiments from the conversion table. So let us go back.
Vasudha, here, when
Yeah.
you're pouring, when the lady's pouring out you to a, taller glass, and he says that, okay, this is taller and whatever, he's seeing everything happen in front of him, right?
Yes.
But again, if she puts it back into similar, he'll again say, so he won't even remember, because he can't do that conversion, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so he'll keep making the
still,
same mistake again and again at this age.
he's still in the beginning of the concrete operational stage. He's around 5 or 6 years old. So he's still in the beginning of concept formation. So till the concept formation is done and he is able to understand time, volume, mass, and everything, he'll think of it as different. But the minute he was explained all this, he was able to tell that the number of coins that were placed in the second row that was spread so wide apart was still the same as the number of coins in the second row. Okay, because he's able to understand, he's able to grasp that concept because she explained it and made him do the counting, right? That is how he understood it.
No, what I'm saying is he still will not grasp
Yeah.
the concept. Again, if she rearranges it, he'll make the same mistake. That's what I understand out of
Yes.
this, isn't it?
See,
Yeah.
there is a possibility that depends on the understanding level. No, every child understands at a different pace. If this person is able to understand now, well and good. Otherwise, he'll learn through error, right? Seema,
Yeah.
am I?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think we'll take it up again end of the session. So I just want,
Definitely,
but great.
definitely.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Okay. Now we move on to the social development. Now, what is social development? Social development is how these kids interact with people apart from their family and including within their family also. How they interact with another person, how they're talking to another person, is their level of emotion in the talk also as per the norms. All this is under the social development. Now, first, we're going to see the relationship of children with their parents and their siblings. Now, children at the age of 6 and 7 generally show inclination towards spending time with their friends more than with their family, right? They want to spend more time with their friends. So we'll have play dates, or we like play dates in the sense they go around, play with their friends, they spend more time. No matter how many times they're called back to the house, they'll want to spend more time with their friends. They show, okay, I hope you got that. Because people who have kids at this age will understand. They want to spend more time playing, right? They show more importance to adults who are not their parents or not a part of their family. So teachers and other uncles and aunties apart from their family members are more important to them. They listen to them better than they will listen to their own parents. Okay, and they want to be more adult like, they want to be more independent and show a lot more interest in making their own decisions. They want to make their own decisions. I remember when I was 10 years old, my dad took me shopping and I was like, no way am I going to let you buy me the clothes that you want. I want to buy my own clothes. I want to decide my own clothes. I remember from that time on, we started buying clothes that were more liked by me. That is one example I can give you of that stage because I remember that incident very much. Now, parents at this stage, what does my dad do at this stage? Should he scream at me and say, no, I'm your father, I will buy what you have to wear? Or should he have to say, no, okay, let's compromise and let's see what we all of us like? So a parent there must guide the child without being overprotective. No, They shouldn't be like, no, no, no. If you do this, you're going to make a mistake, so I won't let you take the decision. No, they're not supposed to say that. They're supposed to be there for them and help them make the decision and provide guidance and support so that these people can learn how to make their own decision. So in the end, when it came to my shopping spree at that age, we came to a decision saying that 2 out of 3 members of my family must like the cloth in order for us to buy it. If 3 out of 3 like it, well and good. If 2 out of 3 like it, fine, you're taking it. So that is how we came up with an agreement or a cooperation amongst ourselves in order to face that situation where I can make my decisions. So I always have a guide with me to say which one I'm doing well or not. These children are ready to take up more responsibilities. That means children at the age of 6, 7, at this stage, they look at you doing stuff and they want to take up more responsibility. They want to be more independent. So what must the parent do? The parent must not say, no, you're a child, you can't do this, you can't handle it. Give them certain responsibilities. So if you have pots in your house, like Srivalli has shared those photos of her garden where she has those flower pots. No, if she has a child of say 6 or 7 in her house, she should say, now go water them on a daily basis. This is the chore she's giving to her, to him or her. This is a responsibility she's giving to him or her. So he has to take care of the plants, watering the plants every day. That means he is taking up a responsibility under the supervision of the parent. Now, this is an important thing. So these children, as I said, are more ready to take up responsibilities, and parents must provide them with household chores or personal items which is needed to develop their useful life skills. They can get more self-confident by doing this. See, when the plant grows a little more, he can say that, oh, I've watered them, I've done it. So his confidence is increasing. And these tasks must be appreciated in and also related in their day-to-day life. So when he is taking care of a plant, that means he is ready to take care of another thing. So next, maybe possibly if they want a dog, maybe you can negotiate something and then get them a dog so that they can take care of that being, that animal, so that they know how to be responsible for someone else apart from their own. These young, I call these people young adults with the inspiration of Gabriel Iglesias, if anybody knows him, because he calls anybody about the age of 10 as young adults. These young adults tend to take the side of their friends and peers in conflicts about telling truth. So if a conflict is happening, now the parent, okay, he makes a mess, or the child makes a mess. The father comes and asks him what is happening. He is conflicted as to whether to tell the truth or not. So at that point of time, he'll remember what his friends say, if that based on the punishment and all that, you can tell a lie or you should tell the truth. That depends on their pure behavior as well. This can be modified in the child. Sorry, this can be modified when the child is aware of the reason behind a certain belief. So if the peers say, no, you have to lie when you break a vase because otherwise you'll get hit. So the child will definitely put it on the dog or the cat or some other person in the house just to get rid of the punishment, just to keep them safe from the punishment. But no, if the peer group says, no, you have to accept it and own the mistake that you've done, the child is going to tell, yes, I have broken the vase. Sorry, calls keep coming in. So a young adult has a higher self-esteem. Younger adults with higher self-esteem are seen to be more happier and more effective in their day-to-day functioning. A self-esteem is influenced by the child's preparation at home and sorry and whatever that's going on them, right? When the child's preparation at home, suppose say the parent is more supportive, their self-esteem is increased if they're being more independent and all that, right? So self-esteem which is good, leads to a happier child. Okay, the school of experiences also have a huge influence on that self-esteem. Now, parents are expected to provide the child with reasonable and yet consistent guidelines. These rules and regulations might be considered as strict by these children, but at a certain point of time, these children will understand that these rules and regulations that are there are meant for them to have their own independence in a fixed guidelines. It is like, a cycling lane. All the cyclists here will understand what I mean by a cycling lane. It is the lane that is given to the cyclists to do their thing. But if they generally come out from those cycling lanes, they have a higher risk of meeting with an accident and all that. Now, these parents are expected to provide the guidelines in which the child can take their own decisions and all that. Mothers at this stage are expected to teach interpersonal skills, that is soft skills, and the fathers generally encourage the child to be more independent and assertive. They want the child to be more like their father when it comes to social situations which needs assertion and all that. And mothers generally take care of the soft skill side when need be. Now, siblings also play a very important role in the child's life. So at a certain point of time, friends are a different issue, your parents are a different issue. You rely heavily on your sibling. I wouldn't understand this, I'm a single child, but I've seen these relationships. No, your elder brother or the elder sister generally takes care of you when you need something. So if you are too scared to talk to your parents about something, you can go to your elder sibling. Or if you want something done, you can go to your younger sibling, something like that. So your sibling relationships are very, very important at this point of time. These also help you practice your social skills. Now, peer groups, what are peer groups? Peer groups are your contemporaries. Children between the age of 6 and 9 generally tend to form small groups. Now, these groups, as I said, are small and they do not have a hierarchy, they do not have a structure. And the members in this group generally tend to change a lot. And you can see this till the fifth grade. And at this point of time, your the group in which your child is generally stabilizes and the membership gets more permanent. Okay, they don't let anybody else in and they don't tend to let anybody else out. Peer groups generally tend to follow a social norm or a social practice no matter what the age. That means your courtesies, your behavior, everything must follow social norm. Okay, these groups help pass on and share information. The attitudes generally are the same. They influence each other through reinforcements and modeling. I mean, they generally tend to be a role model at this particular time, because someone who's a little more creative is definitely a role model to the child who is not so creative, because they want to be like them. So that is your modeling reinforcement. If this one child is trying to do something bad and the other kids in the peer group tend to pull them back, that is reinforcement, right? Otherwise, if that child is trying to do something good and these people go and support this child, it is again the reinforcement. Positive and negative come in here. Adherence to the rules and regulations is very important. So suppose, say I'm in a group of 10 people and I go and snitch on someone. That is against the rules, so I'll be kicked out of the group immediately. That is not allowed, right? There are certain rules of the group and the group must maintain this and the child must follow them. While there are most of the countries understand that children during their pure years, that is between the ages of 7 to 12 and all that, depend on their friends for information and behavioral changes and other things, right? So your peer opinion is more mattered to you than your parent opinion. Now, in countries like Soviet Union, this peer culture is rejected. The peers in that place also tend to support the adult culture and its values. So whatever your adults say, your friends are going to say the same thing, because of which the entire community is kind of on the adult culture. Okay, Gottman in the year 1977 stated that 5 categories of children have been studied out of a total, sorry, he could categorize these children under 5 groups after studying a total of 113 children. Sociometric stars, these are the children liked by everyone, generally the popular kids. The second type is the mixers. These are the people who are liked by some, not liked by others. Teacher negative is the type of students who generally are disliked by the teachers. They generally have a fight with the teachers no matter when you see. And these guys again are liked by few and not by many. Tuned out are these children who are sorry, these people are with they're more ignored, as in he's there, not there. There's the invisible children, the kids, right? In the college, if you've seen Princess Diaries, all the ladies here, Princess Diaries, the first yeah, Mia is generally ignored, right? By a large extent, she's ignored. She's not rejected. She's not bothered about. Someone comes and sits in her lap also once. So it is like that. So these people are ignored. And sociometric rejection, these people are 2 main types: the withdrawn rejected or the aggressive rejected. Withdrawn rejected are generally the introverts and the nerdy type of children who do not mingle with other children very easily. These are the shy types because they're already very nerdy. They're very nervous, thinking that the other person might uh, judge them and all that. And the aggressive rejected are these bad boy types or the bad girl types who are generally very aggressive in nature. They hit people, and these are the bullies. You can call them the bullies. Okay. And the types of friends all throughout your life, there are 5 types of friends that you'll face all throughout your life. Playmates come from 3 to 7 years of age. Playmates are the kids that you play with, right? As children, you sit together and play in the adult supervision. And assistants are those friends that come to your help whenever you need it. You help them, they help you. Cooperates are the children who generally share a similar goal or a procedure. Like these clubs or sorry, what do you call them? Niches that you see in school. These drama club, the computer geek club, the chess club, and all that thing that you see. These are all cooperates. Intimates and mutual supporters are these children this happens between the years of 9 and 15. They're more friends with who share goals and values, and they provide intimacy and support. That means they give you the feeling that I'm there for you and all that. These are generally your school friends who, even now, if you have survived the occasional disagreement, you are still in touch with them. Dependents and autonomous, these are the friends that are there for you no matter what you need, but they have their independent goals. Like suppose, say, me and my best friend, I wanted to become a pastry chef, she wanted to become an architect. So I've become a pastry chef and she is now doing her MA architecture, and we have our independent goals. So we were dependent on each other for our emotional needs, but for our intellectual needs, we were totally autonomous. Okay. Now social cognition. What is social cognition? It is a cognition in which people perceive, think, about interpret or categorize and judge their own social behavior and those of others. So if you look at teenagers, they're generally always questioning if their behavior in a social setting is right or not. Even as adults, we do this. We try to think of our behavior in a certain situation if it is right or not. If someone suppose was very aggressive in a place that did not need aggression, they try to break it down and see why they were so aggressive in that situation. This is all called social cognition. The study of this social cognition involves aspects of both cognitive psychology and social psychology. Now, cognitive psychology is the way you're thinking, right? The way you're perceiving your memories and everything. And your cognitive part of your psychology definitely affects your social part of your psychology. Suppose, say you were, remembering or memorizing something, or it was a very aggressive event that you were recollecting, and suppose someone says tries to scare you, you will probably slap him or her, because they're trying to scare you in a time when you're already thinking about a scary or a very aggressive event, right? That is all a part of your social and cognitive psychology. A guy named Selman in the year 1980 described the development is a view of 5 stages. So he viewed development as 5 stages. Egocentric, that was where no other perspective but mine. That was a stage where the child is like, no, my way is the only way. And the next one is your social informational. Here is where the child thinks that, okay, fine, the other guy has a different view, but in case of a situation that similar to mine, he'll think the same way as I do. Self-reflective, it is when these people start to accept that people apart from them have different conclusions apart from their own. Mutual is where you can stand in someone else's shoe, so your other point of view is also seen. Social and conventional is where you can actually analyze a perspective in an abstract terms. That is, you're looking at a movie. Suppose, say, you're looking at a movie, and the way the person feels in the movie, it is abstract. See, it's all fictional, but yet you're able to connect with it because you can think of it in an abstract way. Self-esteem is the degree to which the qualities and characteristics contained in one's self-concept are perceived as positive. So one self-concept, if the self-concept of one person is seen as positive, it regards to a high self-esteem. So it reflects a person's physical image or self-image, uh, views of his or her accomplishments and capabilities, the values and perceived success in that which we live up to, as well as the ways in which the other person views them and responds to them as a person. So if you look at the first photo, this person is always like, I can do this. I have so many strengths and all that. He has a healthy self-esteem. He's able to say no to stuff that would probably harm him. But the second guy in the red shirt is like, oh, I don't believe there is another way for me. So he's belittling himself. He's put himself in a functional fixedness or helplessness point of view, and he's making himself helpless. He has a low health self-esteem, due to which he's not able to bring himself to a position where he is actually achieving something. Okay, so again, self-image, ideal self, and self-esteem, all these play a very important role in the part in looking at yourself or keeping yourself happy. Moral development. What is moral development? Moral development is the gradual formation of an individual's concept of right and wrong, the conscience, ethical and religious values, along with social attitudes and behavior. Some of the major theorists in this area of moral development are people like Sigmund Freud, Jean Piaget, Erik Erikson, and Lawrence Kohlberg, who will be coming to us in a little bit. Now, Jean Piaget's moral development. He says that a child enters the concrete age around the age of 6, concrete operational stage around the age of 6 or 7. And Piaget termed it as a heteronormous morality. This is the type of thinking characteristic of a young child who equates good behavior with obedience, just as they equate morality of an act only with its consequence. For example, someone broke 15 cups by accident, and they would be judged by judged to a far worse transgression than 1 cup. So if I break 1 cup, it is bad, but if I break 15 cups, it is worse. And the number of cups I break, the more the number of cups I break, the more mischievous I am considered. Egocentrism in younger children is encourages them to follow 3 beliefs or stick to 3 beliefs. Imminent justice. So anything that is done wrong leads to punishment. Suppose, say, look at the girl who's copying from the guy's girl sitting right beside her. If she gets caught, she's definitely punished. Objective consequences. Morality of an act is judged by its objective consequence and not by its intention. So suppose, say, some guy murdered someone. He is judged by the act, but nobody checks the intention behind it. Intention may be that the guy who had been murdered had begged this guy to murder him because he was suffering from something. Okay, so euthanasia. Nobody thinks about the intention that the person has while killing the other person. They only judge them by their act. This is just an example, just an example. Absolutism. Moral absolutism asserts that there are certain universal moral principles by which all people's actions may be judged. So it is that the rule book by which everybody is judged. Okay. Now, stages, there is another thing called as autonomous morality. Now, there are stages to it. So by the age of 9 and 10, a person becomes less egocentric and they realize that the rules are more arbitrary in nature. What is arbitrary? It is based on random choice or personal whim rather than a reason or a system. Okay, so they realize that a rule that is there is not is more of or less a guideline, and it is not a hard and fast thing, right? So moral authority is replaced by a certain percentage to a certain percentage by mutual understanding and morality based cooperation. So again, here, moral authority. So when we go back to the example that I gave you of me being 10 years old and the fight between me and my dad about shopping, there we went through the morality based cooperation, saying that 2 out of 3 should like the dress in order for us to buy it. So the authority has been replaced by cooperation and mutual understanding. See, the cooperation is, okay, fine, I'll buy you the dress that you want, but the more mutual understanding is that 2 out of 3 should like it. Rules and specific situations are there to help make a judgment. So these children at this stage understand that a rule or a specific situation or a motivation is a guideline. It is like, a cycler's path that you have. It is better that you stay within it. If you go outside, there's a risk, but it is left up to you. The judgment can be made by the child itself. Okay, and a child at this age tends to generally be confused why its behavior in different situations warrants different reactions from different people. So a few days ago when Geeta was taking her class, she talked about a child going into the father's den and playing around there. The father may be happy or very pleasant with the way the child is playing there, but next day he might have a meeting, and when the child comes in and starts playing, the father will get angry and start screaming at the child. He wouldn't understand, and his mom is busy. So when he goes and asks his mom why dad is screaming at me, she might get irritated. So it is getting very confusing at that point for this child. I hope I'm clear.
Yes.
Okay. Another small video on Piaget's moral development. Can anybody hear this? Because I can't caption.
Not really.
Okay, so this if anybody sees the Modern Family, I think you can understand the situation. The little girl comes and talks to her aunt and says, why don't you go to the makeup room, because they're calling for you there. And what she means is, you still look ugly, please go to the makeup room. That is what she meant, as the child meant. And the aunt is like, no honey, I came from the makeup room, why would I go back again? So she knows that this child is calling her ugly. So the morality of the child is not yet completely developed here. Let's look further. Look at her pushing away the ladders of her uncle's caravan. The minute he was about to go shooting, and he falls. So read this. The pre-moral period. Okay, this is the pre-moral period before her moral development has actually taken place. At this stage, the child is not concerned about the rules and the makeup of his or her own good. Okay, sorry. Rules and makeup. And I get you on. I hope you got it. Okay. In this clip, Lily displays that she has no regards for the rules, and she does not want, she does what she wants and does not care how it affects other people. This is the pre-moral stage. So this particular clip says that the girl in the blue dress can say whatever she wants. Her mom said, you can say whatever you want. So she took it very literally. And when her friend or her aunt, someone wore a wig or dyed her hair, she asked her aunt if she had actually colored her. So she's still commenting about her aunt's or her mom's hair, the way her hair looks and all that. So the heteronomous morality, the rules are determined by the authority figure. To the child, the rules are concrete and there is no going around them. So they do not know how to work around the rule that says that, no, your mom has actually fixed the rule. You have to follow it blindly. That is what they think. And let's move on to the so the short guy is the best friend of this tall guy in the green jacket. So he gives him a gift and he's very eager for the friend to open the gift. And he's so eager that he's like, no, you don't open it, I'll open it for you. And he takes out a brand new basketball. Now, the guy in the green hoodie is actually very confused as to why his friend is giving him the ball. So, a little backstory: the green hoodie guy had actually had a few family issues, and they couldn't buy anything for Christmas. So the short guy, gets to know about it. So he is giving his friend the ball. And the minute the green guy in the the green hoodie guy gets to know that this guy is showing him pity and stuff like that, or trying to be very sweet to him, he'll back off by saying, see, this is a social norm. I get it, but no, you don't have to give me a gift. That is what he's saying. So, autonomous morality. The child or adolescent starts to understand how social situations affect rules. They start to understand perspective and how some rules can be changed. Corey understood that his friend Sean would not be experiencing a very Merry Christmas this year. So he decided to give him a gift, and Corey displays an advancement or a taking perspective taking, which is a characteristic of autonomous morality. Okay, let's go back. We move on to Kohlberg's theory of moral development. Now, Lawrence Kohlberg's theory was based on the cognitive development and theory based on Jean Piaget's stages of cognitive development. Lawrence Kohlberg wanted to expand the theory or extend the idea of Piaget. He created a three-stage theory and studied moral development by throwing some moral dilemmas to a group of children, adolescents, and adults. So when you're faced by a moral dilemma, you try to think of it in three different ways. Okay, so depending on the answers that he got, he understood how moral reasoning changed as a person grew older. Okay, now the first two stages are known as the pre-moral stage. Okay, here the person just change the slide. Okay, here the person generally takes his decision on the factors of obedience and punishment. So if something is happening, yeah, if I try, okay, suppose say there's someone in the playground and two kids are fighting. Think I'm in the pre-conventional stage. My decision to help the guy who's being beaten up depends on whether I get caught, and if I get caught, will I be punished? So someone, suppose say Praharsh is standing right there. His idea is about okay. Let's say Praharsh is standing there and watching this guy get beaten. So what he thinks is, if I help this guy now, will he help me back in time of need? Because when I help this guy, definitely the people who are beating him up will come and beat me too. So if I help him, will he come and stand up for me? The stage 3 that comes into the conventional stage is whether people think of you as a good boy or a good girl. So when this person is getting beaten up, you look around. Suppose say Ritika looks around and says, see, again, these are examples, okay? Please don't take it personally. So you look around and see that nobody else is helping this guy who's getting beaten up. So what you do, you stay back. This is so that the other person thinks you're very good. Now, the third person or the fourth person is Sunita. She comes in and she stops this fight because she's the teacher in the playground. We are all kids and she's a teacher. She comes in and she's like, no, you're not supposed to fight. That's very unlawful. So what she does is she takes the law and order. She thinks about the activity that is going on in a law and order kind of a way. So the rule is there, nobody's fighting. She stops the fight. A fourth person or a fifth person is looking at all this happening. Suppose say Seema is looking at all this happening. So she'll be like, this guy who's getting beaten recently hit someone else. So this guy actually deserves what is going on. So she's thinking of it in a social contract point of way. Thinking of it as a karma, you can say. He hit someone, he's getting beaten up now. Now, suppose say Vikram comes in. Vikram comes in and he's like, no, his way of thought. Now, Seema's way of thought, that is a social contract way of thought, and Vikram's way of compassionate thinking, these are the post-conventional morality. And it is said that very few people reach this stage. And when it comes to Vikram's way of thinking, he's like, no, everybody should be peaceful with each other. Fighting is not allowed. It is fine, but they should do it in a way. I mean, whatever is happening should be in a very compassionate way. They're supposed to be in a very considerate way. I'm not sure if I got this through to all of you, but just in case I haven't gotten it through, let's go and watch another video. Okay, is it okay if I send this to someone else and they can share it, because I don't think this has been heard.
You can
Right?
just share it in the group. Yeah, share it in the group. You can just quickly tell us what it is about, probably.
Yeah.
It's already
So
9:10. Masudha, how long do you think it will be?
Just 5-10 more
Time?
minutes. Sorry,
Okay,
5-10
okay.
more minutes.
You can
Okay.
just quickly tell
So,
us. Yeah.
okay. You know what? I'll do one thing. I'll send this in WhatsApp so we can skip this. Anybody who wants the PPT can also view this. All right. The link is given in the PPT itself. Let's move on, and maybe after all this, we can sit and watch. Now, emotional development. This is one of the most important stages of development that a child has to go through. It is a gradual, what is emotional development, by the way? A gradual increase in the capacity of experiencing, expressing, and interpreting a full range of emotions and the ability to cope with them appropriately. So, a child, when he's like, what, say 2 or 3, he wants something, he looks at it, he cries. If the parent is not giving it to him, temper tantrum, melt down right in the middle of the mall. Okay. And this has to be controlled, appropriately controlled over the period of time. Suppose a 10-year-old wants something and his father is like, no, he can't have a meltdown right in the middle of the mall when everybody is looking at him, right? Because he's actually grown up to a young adult stage. So this gradually he understands that he has to control this. So I'll read this again. Emotional development is a gradual increase in the capacity to experience, express, and interpret a full range of emotion and the ability to cope with them appropriately. And the emotion of a late childhood is different from that of an early childhood in 2 different ways: the situations that give rise to the emotional reaction and the form of expression. As I said, a child who is, say, in the early childhood, that is 5-6 years, if he throws a temper tantrum, it's fine. Okay, it's cute for onlookers. It is very annoying for the parents. But a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old throwing a temper tantrum is very annoying to anybody who watches it, right? So the way, the situation in which the person is reacting, the emotional reaction it is warranting, and the form of expression. I can't shout at a person who I'm talking to in the middle of a street, because that is wrong. And next is subsiding of these emotions tend to generally happen when a person is getting adjusted in the school days, right? This is because the roles, as a person grows older, the roles that he has to play are very well defined. He understands the roles that he has to play. All the pent up energy that he has, the aggression that he has, or the child has, when the child is growing, generally is dissipated during the games period, the PE period or PT period that we have. So sports and games, this exercise that happens when the games period is happening generally helps the energy release, and they do not build up those irritability and aggression and all that. With the increase of skills, frustration reduces. So the more skills that the child develops, so singing, dancing, karate, all these are skills, right? So as these skills increase, the frustration, because the creative energy that is there in him that is not getting out in any other format comes out through skills. Now, can someone tell me what the uh, common emotions that we go through are? Can someone help me with this? I prefer if it is not from the textbook.
Common emotions: fear,
Yeah.
love, anger, hate, hatred,
Loneliness.
Yeah.
happiness.
This is when talking in terms of childhood.
Okay.
Childhood. Love, yes. Joy, yes.
Loneliness can also be there, yeah, in childhood.
That is
Times
very
you get
rare
rejected,
during
fear of
childhood, right?
rejection.
Excitement.
Yeah. These are all again termed, right? Okay. So yes, all these emotions are valid. Let's look at them. Fear, as Seema said, fear. It is a basic or intense emotion aroused by the detection of an imminent threat involving an immediate alarm reaction that mobilizes the organism by triggering a set of psychological changes. So, what is fear? When you're looking at an imminent threat, suppose say you see a bully coming towards you, your immediate reaction is fight flight, right? Fight or flight. So it is mobilizing your entire organism. It is your entire psychological changes happen, right? The amygdala starts working in rapid rates. Either you fight with the bully or you run away from the bully. All fear stimuli tend to be sudden and unexpected. So onset of the bully is not planned, right? He sees you, he comes towards you. He doesn't see you till then, and it is all of a sudden that he's coming towards you. Certain body reactions, that certain body languages that you can see of a person who's actually scared, who is frightened, are shyness, embarrassment, worry, and these are all emotion related expressions, right? Anxiety, and these are all few fear related emotions. Now, expression of fear can be observed again in the body language by general motor discharge, uh, retreat, and withdrawal. So the minute I see the bully walk towards me, I'm running away. Withdrawal, retreat. Imaginary illnesses. So this person has given me a nice beating yesterday. Today I don't want to go to school. I'm like, Ma, I'm feeling sick. My stomach is hurting. My head is hurting. I broke my leg. I broke my hand. I'm not going. I'm shivering. Whatever imaginary illnesses you can get, chicken pox, cancer, everything. I'll be like, no, Ma, I'm not going to school today. That's all. Quacking, I'm not exactly sure what it is. I'll get back to you people. Okay. Next is anxiety. This is generally when you are in constant fear. Anxiety follows this fear. So the more afraid you are, no, you generally tend to develop anxiety. Now it is an emotional characteristics. Sorry, it is an emotion characterized by apprehension and somatic symptoms of tension, which an individual anticipates impending danger, catastrophe, and misfortune. So imminent danger. See, as we've seen in fear, when you're looking at imminent threat that is walking right towards you, your body immediately mobilizes itself and in flight or fight response. It is the same thing that happens with anxiety, just at a larger level, right? It is a little more complex than fear. So the body often mobilizes itself to meet the perceived threat. So threat is what? Impending danger, catastrophe, misfortune, whatever it is that is coming towards you. So what happens? Muscle become more tense, your breathing becomes faster, your heartbeat increases, you're sweating profusely, you're not able to move. Many things happen. You start biting your teeth, you're shaking your leg, sweating, and everything, right? This tends to appear, this anxiety that is coming out of fear, no, generally tends to appear during your early school years, that is fourth to sixth grade. And anxiety comes in the form of depression, nervousness, irritability, mood swings, restlessness, quick to anger, increased sensitivity, all these. And guys, trust me, anxiety is not a joke. I know most of the parents, not the ones here, anybody outside this, if you see, when you say you're anxious about something or you're afraid of something, generally it is still a taboo in India. I have not seen a person respond favorably to an anxiety filled situations. It happened quite a number of times right in front of my eyes, and I still couldn't do anything because I was a kid at that point of time. Okay, I know most of you guys with sorry, most of you people with children know who this person is, right? The one in the photos, guys.
Yeah. Inside Out movie, Anger.
Incredible, no? I used to know him. I don't know now.
Anger, anger. He's Anger, Inside Out movie. If you know the movie Inside Out, you'll know who he is. He
Okay.
bursts out in
Yeah,
anger.
yeah, right. Okay.
Okay. So basically, if you watch your Inside Out movie, you'll generally tend to understand the entire of this chapter. I believe that. Okay. So this is the most expressed emotion during childhood. This is more expressed during childhood than fear. So fear is next to anger. What is anger? And anger is an emotion characterized by tension and hostility arising from frustration or real or imagined injury by another or a perceived injustice. So something is wrong, something is not happening right with me, or if I think that something is not happening right with me, I become very angry. It is generally out of frustration or helplessness, right? It is either because someone fell down and broke their leg, or they think they broke their leg, that anger manifests itself. So it can manifest itself in behaviors designed to remove the object of anger, that is determined actions, or behavior designed to merely express an emotion, that is swearing. So when a person is angry, if you see, they either hit someone or physically try to do something, or verbally, if they can't physically do something about it, they start swearing, they start cursing another person. Anger is a distinct form, but is significant. It is a significant activator of aggression. Okay, it is a behavior which is intended to harm someone or something. So at a certain point of time, when I was very angry, I used to sit and punch the wall. That was my way of venting out that anger, right? So that is harming someone or something. Two types of anger that is there. It is, one is impulsive, that is an aggressive behavior, decreases with age. The impulsion, that impulsion is wanting something at that particular second. So as a 5-year-old, if I want candy at that point of time and I'm not getting it, impulsion, it comes out automatically. I start throwing temper tantrums. Inhibition or inhibited anger is generally kept under control. So this person is very controlled or looks very controlled from the outside. He's like a saint from the outside, but in from deep within, that anger is venting up. No, that is very. It is like almost like a volcano or a pressure cooker. It is all kept inside, and suddenly at one point of time they'll burst out. So generally, people who have inhibited anger tend to act very hurt. They feel very sorry for themselves. They have a lot of self pity. They start threatening the parent that they're going to run away and all that. Curiosity, this is one thing that is very appreciable in children, because they're very curious to know what is happening around them. So if the sky is blue, they'll be like, mama, why is the sky blue? Why is the road black? Why are you so tall? Why is that person so short? They want to know everything. It is a strong desire to know. It is a thirst for knowledge. The inputs, or sorry, so what is curiosity? It is the impulse or desire to investigate, observe, gather information, particularly when the material is novel or interesting. So if there's something new to the child, they want to know more about it. This drive appears spontaneously in non-human animals and in young children whose sensory exploration and motor manipulation to inspect, bite, handle, taste, or smell practically everything in the immediate environment. So whatever they have around them is very new to them, right? They want to know all about it. So they want to bite into something, or they want to touch something, they want to taste something, they want to smell something. Okay, I have a best example, no relation with human beings, because it says non-human animals. So dogs, I'm going to take the example of dogs. If you ever took your dog on a walk, no, when you're taking them for a walk, they generally try to stop somewhere, start smelling random things, and they keep sniffing till they get most of the information that they need, right? Because dogs' sense of smell is the way they get information from, right? So that is also curiosity, joy, pleasure, delight. What are all these? These are feelings of extreme gladness. If you've seen the picture below, you'll also understand. If you know who that person is, you'll know who this person is as well. Inside out, joy, right? Joy is a feeling of extreme gladness, delight, or excultation of spirit arising from a sense of well-being or satisfaction. A pleasure is the emotion or the sensation that has been induced by the enjoyment or anticipation of what is felt or viewed as good or desirable. What is delight? Delight is a great amount of pleasure. Now, the last part of this chapter is knowing how to control these emotions, right? All emotions that you have are great, very good. Every emotion is needed, but without knowing how to tolerate these emotions, that is the emotional tolerance, a person will not be able to flourish in life. Every child must develop an emotional tolerance, as controlling emotions gets increasingly difficult, because as they grow older, hormonal factors also added to this, which makes it even worse. Emotional tolerance is an ability to accept and adjust unpleasant and emotional experiences. This is an essential condition for emotional balance. Now, emotional balance is very required to maintain your happiness, right? Now, that is the end. Thank you.
Awesome, Vasu.
And she was
Oh.
not prepared, it seems.
I
Superb.
wasn't prepared.
We can
Guys, turn
switch
off
off
the
the recording.
recording, please.
Is this a class without preparation?
Yes,
No,
this is the
yeah,
class.
she's put in a lot of effort in this. This can
Can't believe.
Lot of effort. Ritika, please stop.
How would it be?
Nasima, why so cute?
No. She's written about her son. So for that,
I haven't.
yeah, this is actually one of the best classes. I mean, you can make an amazing psychology teacher. Yeah.
I just
You
read that
made it
comment.
sound
Thank
so
you.
interesting and so engaging.
Ritika,
The examples.
stop the recording.
I think the person who is recording slept in the class today.
Praveen is the host, is it?
I think most of the time what he does is he's just attending and he's just.
Oh, I am the host, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah,
apparently.
Praveen, turn
Switch
off the
off.
recording, please.
Can you? Praveen is usually multitasking.
Now double recording. Kritika is
No, yeah, I can't stop because Kritika started it even though I'm host.
Ritika, are you around?
Probably I can.
I think Ritika is in a
Let's
session
see.
or something.
Yeah, Ritika's in another
yeah.
session, I think.
The best thing to do is end the class so that the
I
recording.
think so.
Yeah.
Automatically. But what if it doesn't get recorded? Yeah. Does that happen?
It does, I believe.
I hope so. Yeah. We don't want this to be not recorded. It's one of the most amazing classes.
Absolutely.
Awesome. It was. Yeah. What your videos and
Praveen, explore your host powers.
I'm just trying to do that.
To show your hidden talent, tech guy.
yesterday it
Otherwise,
was
I won't
post.
believe that you're from IT.
Oh, is it?
I said, otherwise, I'm not going to believe that you work in IT.
Seriously, you know, all this is getting recorded, right?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it
We're
is.
talking about him.
Seema,
Huh?
Can we all leave? Bye.
actually, I told about my son as Vasudha talked about anxiety.
Correct.
And
It's being
you
recorded.
probably-
Do you think
Yeah,
we should
yeah.
tell it?
Wait,
Praveen, do one thing. No,
Ritika,
make me the
wait.
host. Make me the host, Praveen.
What? How will that help?
I can stop
Would
the
not
recording.
help.
I think Ritika is back.
You can try now, but
Ah,
I
Vasudha
don't
is
think
host now.
Yeah.
you can stop because
No,
only
yeah.
other way that I can see is probably ending the meeting or
Or
I
why
don't-
don't you call them?
Yeah, you know
One
what?
more.
Bye. I am going off the meeting. I'm really hungry. I haven't had
Yeah, I
anything.
know.
Bye.
Half were you, 1.5 hours.
Hey,
Chalo, we'll leave. Bye-bye.
Chalo, bye.
okay.
Bye. We'll
End
catch
the meeting. End the meeting. Don't go just.
End for all. End for all. Bye.